Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Growth Almanac. This is a podcast where we talk about big ideas and small steps that lead us to growth.
Hi everyone, I'm Shresta, your host, passionate about exploring ideas that inspire growth, shift in mindset, and spark some meaningful conversation. In today's podcast, we are going to talk about a very interesting rule, that's the 80-20 rule, and I can't wait to dive in. Uh, it's a principle that holds such huge value in our lives. But I don't think a lot of people even know about it. So I'm very curious to understand better, Ruby.
Thank you for picking this one.
Yeah, no problem at all. So let's start. I want to know what is your definition of this 80-20 rule?
Um, it's actually in this case, it's the standard definition
Mm-hmm.
that 80% of the outcomes that you get is caused by 20% of the effort that you put into it. It may not be, it's not really a hard and fast rule. It could be 80-20, 90-10, 99-1, or 70-30, any combination there. But if I take a step back and generalize the principle, it really is about majority of your outcomes are a result of a small percentage of the effort or the causes. So that's
Right.
how I look at it.
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, I have I read about it in a book, but it was a passing read, right? I did not give it too much attention, but I remember during the pandemic there was a time where I was struggling with um, a lot of tasks. There was too much going on, and I confided in one of my friends, and I was like, "It's getting too much. I'm so stressed. I'm not able to sleep well. It's really affecting me." And that's when he reintroduced me to it, and he mentioned that why don't you use this rule? Try to prioritize the most important 20% of your tasks. Go do that, and you can see that your 80% of your stress will come down. And that actually helped me, and that's when I was interested, and I started reading more about it, and it was actually quite mind blowing. I
Do
did not.
you, do you know how this principle came into being, or who was the first who introduced this?
I think it was Pareto.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so so when I was reading about it, that's when I saw that, and I remember he was an Italian, and what he saw was in Italy, I think in early 1900s, if I'm not wrong, 80% of the real estate or property was owned by 20% of that population, and apparently it's still true.
You know, when you say the real estate,
Uh-huh.
actually it was about gardening. He recognized that in his garden that, sorry, 20% of the pea pods produced 80% of the good peas. And
Oh,
then he equated that to the land. Land was used in Italy. So it's a very interesting, I mean, if you think about it, it's such a simple concept,
I
right?
know.
And it applies to every aspect of your life. I'll ask you a question.
Mhm.
What percentage of your clothes you wear the most?
It's so interesting because I always complain that I don't have enough clothes, and my husband always points out that you always wear just this part of your clothes and you don't wear the rest of it, which falls into this principle where I've not measured it, but I can say that it's probably about 20%.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like it applies to every aspect of our life. Think about Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Actually, first let's talk about businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
20% of the customers help with or make up 80% of the revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually reading up on Apple's revenue. I was going through some history of Apple, and it's like iPhone is the single most product from Apple, and its revenue from iPhone is more than MacBook, iWatch, and all of their other products combined. We talked about personal life, like we talked about clothes, we're talking about businesses. It applies to every
Every.
aspect of our life.
And how did you come across this, Ruby?
I don't think I ever read it. The actual principle, I never studied it, I never read it.
Mhm.
It was just at work you suddenly start hearing the terms.
Mhm.
So many, many years ago, like I heard about it. But when I think back, I think even unconsciously, I've been applying this principle since my school times.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yes, so I was a person who did not like to study. When we were growing up, a lot of our education was you get your grades by rote, right? You learn everything and then you go
Mhm.
produce it as is. So I wasn't that person. So I would always, so I wouldn't study the actual course material, okay?
Mhm.
But I would get like the question papers of the last 10 years and I would just read the questions. And I still haven't put a finger on why I found that interesting. Maybe someday I will analyze that and figure out why. But I'm talking like seventh grade. I'm talking my high school board exams. I'm talking my intermediate. And I'm talking about my engineering entrance exams. Okay. So I would just read the questions. Like when everyone else is studying course material for the entire year, I'm just reading the questions passingly 5 minutes a day or something like that. So what would happen is when I did get back to now, tomorrow is the exam or next week is the exam. So I do need to study, otherwise I'm not going to pass. So I'm going to my textbooks and somehow those patterns and those questions, they start like I synthesize them and I'm like, I'm focusing on exactly the portions I need to study.
Wow.
Okay. So what I'm trying to tell you is that a very small portion of that whole course material is what I needed to study to get the grades that I really would get. So
I
it was very
interesting. And as a seventh grader to figure this out,
I don't
even
think I figured it out. It was a very unconscious thing that happened, and it has stayed with me even now, right?
wow,
So
that's brilliant, Ruby. I mean, I am impressed that it worked out and you were able to keep up with it and make sure that that's
I,
what
I
we
I
do.
think maybe because it was not done consciously.
Mm-hmm.
I just like I said, I have to still figure out why that process stuck with me. But I've used this. You and I,
Mm-hmm.
we at work, you and I, we were working on a project a few years ago where we were looking at our cloud costs,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
What did we find? That 80% of our savings that we achieved came from 20% of the resources or principles, right? We've got overspec resources. We've got the way we identified wastage. We went through this. Did we say, hey, we're going to apply the 80-20 rule? No, it's just there in your subconscious and you just continue to apply it.
That was going to be my next question, like where where did you or how did you apply this after knowing the rule? Say that you found out that there is this rule called 80-20. Did you ever apply that into any aspect of your life, be it at work, in your relationship or your habits, for example?
So, like I said, unconsciously, I've been applying it
Mhm.
forever. But if I have to say, how did I apply it consciously? Okay. As I rose up in the corporate ladder,
Mhm.
right? I used to be this GSD person, get
Mhm.
stuff done, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
success meant here's the project. I want to make sure it is done well
Mhm.
with um, on time with quality and so on and so forth. And then you rise up and you realize you have a team to do all of these things, and you need to spend your time on
The
the
important.
strategic aspects
Mhm.
of the organization, and you need to figure out how to find time for it, because these other things were so natural and comfort zone for me. And I would be like, if I step out, who's going to do this? And it won't be done well, right? So that is when I purposely, intentionally started looking at my work catalog and saying, no, 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 yes, yes, and reaching yes. And
Very good.
that is how I started applying it.
That's very nice. I remember watching a video where one of the CEOs mentioned something similar, where he said that he made sure that his limited time was spent on only important stuff. He always categorized it as into quadrants, right? What is important and needs to get done right now, what is important but can wait, what is not important and can wait, versus the last one. And he always took the first quadrant, which is important and it needs to be done now. And I think that also kind of applies to what you were talking about 80/20 rule, where you are focusing your time on the important things that's going to get you 80% of the results, and trying to delegate the rest to the others.
I think you are so right. It depends on what your priorities and focus are, and even your personality and mindset. So if you are a perfectionist,
Mm-hmm.
so if you think about it, you and I both are in engineering, right? And you've written code, I've written code.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working in code, you want your code to be perfect, right? So they're like writing it over and over again, and they're like, oh, we need to refactor this and clean it up. But the point is, 80% may be good enough. Getting to the market faster is, with reasonable, good enough, is more important than a perfect that is 6 months late, right? So when I talk to the team, and when I'm whether it's in terms of project management, whether it is in terms of vision, whether it is in terms of coaching the team, in all of those aspects, I'm talking to them and I'm like, think about what is most important. What value did you get out of a particular work item that you are about to work on? Now, what you mentioned earlier, right, where this, you saw this podcast and he actually has a quadrant. I think I'm going to apply that going forward, right? Currently, I am able to process it because I can process and synthesize things very quickly in my head. Maybe it's good enough for me, because even when I say I'm doing things intentionally, I'm actually, prioritizing them, and I'm able to keep it prioritized.
Right,
But someone else who is a perfectionist, it may be harder for them, right? So maybe for them, it's like just jot it down. When you write things down, it adds so much clarity, right? And it makes you take a step back and recognize where the gaps are or where the challenges are. So if they start putting things down, especially people who are starting their career, or even students who are getting overwhelmed with the amount of material that they have to read or study. I mean, another example. So I watch, YouTube videos and conversations from different leaders, right? And I always go back to the same few leaders because I like their talking style. I like the material that I'm getting from it. So again, 20% of the content is what I watch 80% of the time, right? So it applies to every aspect. Even like I think everyone subconsciously applies that.
right,
It's just what parts of your everyday life is where you are applying these
right.
concepts, right?
It's very interesting. Like it took me a long time that this applies to every field, and also how it applies, right? one of the recent changes that I've tried to put into my life is in terms of health and habit, where I've realized that there are certain small habits that I cannot live without. My day wouldn't go well if I don't do those things,
Interesting.
right? So I think we are in a generation where we try to run behind routines, saying that we have to do this, we have to do this, and then only then can you be a successful and a perfect person. Um, but what we're trying to say is doing too much is important. That is not true, right? What is truly important is what the small key things, identifying those key things that truly impact your life, and making sure that you do that, even if it is like a 10-minute workout or 10-minute walk, a 10-minute meditation, if that helps you. uh, because meditation and workout helps me in a day-to-day basis, uh, and it brings me that clarity, and I've noticed in myself that it does not take a lot of time in my day-to-day
So
life.
you really sort of identified what what are the things that actually keep your mind
Right.
and your body healthy, and
Right.
it may be a very small
Hmm.
thing, and that's what you are focusing
Right.
your life on with
Right.
the remaining 80%. So what do you think, we should shed out all this 80% things out of our life, or
No, I don't think that's possible too, right? Like we can, I think what is important for us to understand is we're not saying don't do the 80% of the things that you're doing. It's that try and focus on that 20%. I think the most important thing of this principle is the focus, where to focus on, right? It's the 20% of the things that you do that brings you that 80% result. So instead of going behind being busy, let's try and be more productive by focusing on that 20%.
exactly, and don't let perfection hold you back in trying to focus and moving forward.
Yes, yes. I think, we are like, we come from a generation that glorifies multitasking, doing a lot of things. But I think that's what is holding us back most of the time. Even working with you, Ruby, that is one of the most important things I've learned is having focus. You make sure that you prioritize focus in your team, no matter who it is. If it is a developer, whoever it is, you say what is priority and let's remove all the distraction, and we've seen how well that works, how well we are able to get things done.
This one comes naturally to me. As you read about it, there are aspects of your life when you think back and apply it to, it helps. It
Right.
helps you grow. So
Right.
very, very interesting. I love the
So
conversation, Shrista.
for our listeners who's a first time user of this 80/20 rule, what would your advice be? Where do they start?
Where do they start? I would say start by cataloging. If you are feeling overwhelmed with the number of things that you have, maybe if it's personal life, if it's work life, it is your social life with friends, if there's too many different arenas, maybe take the higher level steps, catalog it, then within that say what is more important to me. From there, go ahead and catalog the next level. I'll call it subcategory. I'm an engineer. I'm going to go category, subcategory, catalog it. And again, find your rhythm, find your priorities. When you start cataloging them, you may think that each one is a priority, right? But then you have to take the opposite view. You have to go and say, if I do this, what results am I going to get? Is that what I am looking for? Am I going to be happy and satisfied? If the answer is yes, do the same thing for the top five things. And if the answer is yes, go for all five in the right priority order. But if it's not, if the answer, some of them start coming no, or the results are very small, or it doesn't align with your goals, move that lower in your priority. It is all about, like you mentioned earlier, focus on what matters to you and prioritize and put all your efforts into that.
That's wonderful, Ruby. I'm going to try and do that myself. I've learned so much today. And to our listeners, if this has been insightful to you, please like and share. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Shrestha.